Hello, I'm Robin Phillips, and in this video we're going to be talking about fake news. Specifically, what is fake news and how does it differ from genuine journalism? And in a follow-up video, I will be giving you the tools you need for assessing the reliability of news reports that you read online. Now, a lot of people are concerned right now about fake news because they don't know who they can trust. And maybe the government is in a conspiracy to deceive us on certain issues. Maybe we can't trust the mainstream media. These are concerns that a lot of people have right now. But the concern about fake news is actually as old as human history. During the First World War, the Allies were notorious for propagating fake news reports to try to rally people against the enemy. And actually, the Germans did that as well. And this had consequences in the Second World War because the war command in Britain hesitated to publicize what they were learning about the Auschwitz concentration camp for out of concern that people would dismiss it as fake news because it sounded so far-fetched. And this actually had consequences when it came to military strategy and tactical decision making. During the 2016 presidential election, concern about fake news received heightened interest. There was a flood of fake news stories, such as this one, which was shared over 2 million times. And Obama signs an executive order banning the Pledge of Allegiance in schools nationwide. There was this one, which was read and shared almost 1 million times, and so forth. So fake news became a part of all of our lives and has really been with us in a heightened way ever since. Now, back in 2016, it was still fairly straightforward to identify what we meant by fake news. It was the sorts of publications that were promoted by the Internet Research Agency, which was a St. Petersburg-based organization that interfered in the 2016 presidential election and led to a number of indictments because that was actually illegal. Or the types of fake news that Christopher Blair produces. He is quite, let's see if I can go over to my picture of him. He's quite open about the fact that, there we go. He's quite open about the fact that he produces fake news for a living. He writes articles for conservatives to consume, such as he did a story about illegal immigrants defacing Mount Rushmore. Another one, Clinton Foundation ship seized at Port of Baltimore carrying drugs, guns, and sex slaves. So he enjoys producing content for uneducated conservatives to get all worked up about. Another example of fake news is the Babylonian Bee, which publishes fake news for humorous purposes. They've got some really funny stories here. Trump cancels 2020 election over coronavirus concerns. You can really have a good time on this site, and they actually admit somewhere on this site to being fake news. Wikipedia has actually produced a list of all the fake news websites. Well, it's not all of them. It's not exhaustive, but it's most of the fake news, most of the main ones throughout the world, along with their URLs. After the 2016 election and moving into 2017, Donald Trump actually began claiming that CNN and NBC and similar sites were examples of fake news. So, and many conservatives followed suit. And so what began to emerge was that fake news began to be used as a pejorative, a slur to cast upon journalists that you disagreed with, who may not be making up stories from from scratch, but who interpreted facts differently or who offered a competing interpretation. Suddenly, this also was a species of fake news. And so fake news the label fake news began to be politicized and in the process to be watered down. CNN is actually not fake news. In June 2017, CNN ran an erroneous report linking Anthony Scaramucci to a Russian investment fund supposedly being investigated by the Senate. And when it was discovered that this report was a mistake, the employees who were responsible had to resign. And Donald Trump tweeted at the time that this proved that CNN is fake news, which is what he's been saying all along. But it actually proved the opposite, because with a genuine fake news site, like, if I can say that without contradiction, a site that is genuinely fake news, like the Babylonian Bee, there are not issues of liability when they report things that are false, when they make something up from scratch. Whereas with a mainstream media organization, there are issues of liability and credibility, and every single fact is checked multiple times, including by many times by their lawyers. And I've discussed this event in more detail in an article on my website, Relativism and the Future of Journalism, at robinmarkphillips.com. These trends in the public discourse have had a trickle-down effect on the epistemology of high school students and college freshmen as well. Now, epistemology is the theory of knowledge, what we believe about truth. Over the last 3 or 4 years, if you ask college freshmen or high school students to write a paper on a controversial subject and to cite news sources, and then if you question the reliability of their sources, they increasingly make comments like the difference between real news and fake news is just a point of view. Objective knowledge isn't possible. Everyone has their own particular bias and spin. So by simply cherry picking articles that back up my opinion, I'm just doing like everyone does. There's no such thing as objectivity. It all comes down to who you choose to believe, who you choose to trust. Critical thinking and logic are not possible. We simply make arbitrary choices of what we believe. This epistemological shift really came home to me yesterday when I got involved in a discussion on Facebook with different people who believe that the coronavirus is a hoax. And they argue that it all just comes down to who you choose to trust. And I responded, quote, "We can exercise our own critical thinking and research skills and then make well-informed judgments that do not depend on putting blind faith in any organization or body." And you would think that would be pretty basic. And for me as a student of research skills in library science, I didn't think that I was saying anything particularly controversial. But in our post-truth culture, to say that there's such a thing as critical thinking and research skills that can inform objective judgments about source evaluation, that is a controversial thing to say. And one of the people I was interacting with responded to that statement of mine saying, quote, "Your solution to sifting out the truth is to take your own counsel and to trust your own judgment." So when I talk about using critical thinking and research skills, they hear me as just trusting my own judgment. Because for many people living in our post-truth culture, that's really what it all comes down to. It's all about who you choose to believe. And the difference between real news and fake news is just a particular point of view. The reason that source evaluation does not just depend on your own private judgment is because there is a whole toolbox of skills and best practices that anyone can learn to engage in objective source evaluation. It's just like learning to play the piano. There are specific skills that can be taught, that can be practiced, and can be learned. And in a future video, we will share 12 skills that you can apply in evaluating sources that you find online and that you can use to hone your personal BS sensor. In the meantime, please check out our growing collection of tutorials about how to do online research. These are aimed at high school students, but they are relevant to anyone living in the online world who wants to use the internet to find information and to do research.